So, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to Open Circle and to Kent and to Kelly and all the people that allow these gatherings and anyone who's contributed. Thank you. Meister Eckhart, there's a nice line. He is said to have said that if you utter one prayer in your entire lifetime, let it be thank you, and that is enough. Isn't that great? You can tell why he wasn't too popular with the Catholic Church. Just go home. Just be grateful. Dance, sing, celebrate life. I'd join that religion. Everything's okay. If that would be a commandment, remember everything's okay. If you want. But if you want to not remember that, that's okay too, right? If you want to suffer, that's part of the experiences that are available to us here. So it's really rather a treat to be able to spend some time simply being. To simply explore being. Or even that perhaps says too much. Simply to be. We live in such an insane world that this is unusual behavior. To shut up and do nothing. To sit down and shut up. That was the beginning and the end of my instruction in Zen. Sit down, shut up. And keep doing it. So how wonderful that we can come into this space and simply notice what there is to notice. And we might notice that there's something about being in and of itself that's rather pleasurable. A quality of awareness itself, or a quality of being itself. Just this. This is as good as it gets. This is as good as it gets. This moment right now, this awareness that we are right now, this being aware, this having this experience right now is as good as it gets. Which is the good news or the bad news, depending upon how you look at it. Sometimes the experience of being human, the experience of being, is just too much. I call it impossible beauty. It's like the nervous system can't take it. Have you had these moments where maybe you see the light shining on a leaf and there's just a moment where me falls away, there's a moment of connection. Maybe you see a child's smile, maybe there's no external stimuli, simply a recognizing what's actually happening, the inexplicable mystery of being. Of being aware. And of being aware of being aware. Wow. thoughts, feelings, sensations. Wow. Ideas of enlightenment, ideas of awakening, ideas of being asleep, ideas of me. A body. Wow, we all get one. Free on arrival. All guests upon planet Earth are given a body to utilize for their duration. So it can be nice to notice sometimes that there's something rather astonishing happening right now. To be aware. To be. Breathing. Being breathed. Connecting. Being able to communicate. To be heard. Like we say talking, we say communicating, it doesn't sound like all that, right? But if we actually consider what's happening, these vibrations leaving this body and hairs oscillating and brains turning it into something that we understand, and that's just the talking word part of it, right? We know there's communication happening here that is non-verbal as well. There's an energetic dance that we're in right now, all of us. Whether we think we signed up to it or not, we are dancing together now energetically. And I think it's kind of fun. And really, what is happening? What's actually happening? I know I have my idea of what's happening, and I know you probably have your idea of what's happening. And then we might have a different idea a moment later of what's happening. We might have the idea of being a Christian or of being a bad person. Then we might have the idea of being a good person. We might have the idea that I am infinite and eternal being, that there's no self here. We might have the idea of being worthy or the idea of being unworthy. And once we've explored all these ideas with some persistence, looking into all these possible ideas, these possible truths, these stories, these cultural narratives, you may come to the conclusion that I came to, which is quite simply that I have no idea what's going on. I actually really have no idea what's happening. And yet, persistently there is this thinking that seems to think that it does know what's going on. So even the not knowing, I remember the first time that this, in Zen there's a virtue made of not knowing. And so I was sitting on a meditation cushion and the not knowing insight arose. And instantly there was the chattering of, ooh, what a wonderful insight to have. I know that I know nothing. And so straight away in the not knowing was that voice wanting to know, wanting to assert itself as something that knows. Which is kind of the bulk of human activity, we could say. Well, it's a helpful lens. Lots of people trying to assert that they know, or identities asserting their existence through claiming ownership, through knowing, through offering opinion, through offering stories about things. And the story that I enjoy living, a story that I enjoy living is that everything's okay, and that all that's ever actually happening is the unfolding of perfection. God playing with itself. What's the swearing threshold like in Berkeley? Can one drop the F word? Or are you going to walk? Yeah, okay.
Pretty loose.
Pretty loose. Cool. Because it doesn't quite, to speak of God making love to itself for the joy of it is sweet and touches it. But I actually prefer all this is God fucking itself for the sheer joy of it. That's actually what's happening. God playing with itself for the sheer delight of creation, for the sheer joy of creation. We are the universe expanding. It's like, oh shit, are we? No one told us. That's probably a good excuse. We were just told that we were biological mechanisms, animals, in the survival of the fittest game. No wonder we've created what we've created. No one told us that we were infinite and eternal being. No one told us that we were consciousness itself, experiencing itself in form, playing hide and seek with itself, that it can know itself. And of course, this is true in every single moment. You may have noticed that it's easier to remember in some moments than others, it seems. It's easier to remember. We just had a delicious meal at Millennium, and we had a chocolate torte. And it was very easy to recognize the perfection unfolding when I tasted the chocolate torte. It wasn't difficult. But then when we hit traffic on I-80 or whatever it was on our way here, and it looked like we were going to be late, was perfection unfolding so clearly then? Yeah, but it wasn't quite as easy. It wasn't quite as immediate. It wasn't quite as straightforward as with the chocolate torte. And so this way of being that I call radical gratitude is about showing up to each moment fully, showing up to each circumstance fully, such that we can extract the fullest of each circumstance, each gift, each moment, within the context that what we are you see, when I say I don't know what I'm talking about or I don't know anything, I'm not just saying that. Words just suddenly started to clunk. How interesting. How exquisite. I had the experience at a recent Open Circle event of my speech being impaired. And I've never experienced that before. It was some sort of neurological thing that was happening, and it was very interesting. So we have all manner of different experiences can arise, all manner of different circumstances arise. And the invitation with this radical gratitude is to open into the fullness of whatever it is that we're experiencing, to find the gift and the opportunity within the challenge. To find the gift and the opportunity within the challenge. In my experience, whenever I look for a gift or an opportunity within a circumstance, I find it. As if I was some sort of creative being that was telling my own story of this little dream that I'm dreaming up. So to look for the gift, to look for the opportunity in our most challenging circumstance, and consider the possibility that if this were true, that there's just the universe expanding, just perfection unfolding, just our expansion, just our ever more fully realized wholeness. If this were true, then the bigger the drama, the bigger the circumstance, the more wrong it is, the greater the opportunity. So stubbing a toe is pretty good start. You stub a toe and you go, ow, and you can notice that there's this thing called pain and then a reactive process and then this noise is made, and it's a little bit insane really, because saying ow doesn't achieve anything, but we do it. So it's like, oh wow, okay, stuff's just happening. Stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl said there's a gap between the two, a gap between stimulus and response. And in this gap is where our freedom lies. Stimulus and response. And in this gap is where our freedom lies. Poignant words from Mr. Frankl, especially. So we look at those extreme cases that you can lose your entire family, you can lose everyone you love in the most grotesque act of cruelty, organized cruelty that humanity has perhaps ever witnessed, and be living in a concentration camp for many, many years. So there's this re-traumatizing, and to find meaning in that, to find opportunity in that, to come out of it grateful. We get to start with the stubbed toe and work our way up to concentration camp experiences. That's the good news. We don't have to take on the higher levels to begin with. We can start with our own emotional discomfort, or we can start with the way our partner speaks to us, or the way we experience our partner speaking to us, to be more precise. Or it might be the traffic. The Bay Area just gets more and more generous in its opportunities to surrender to the traffic. And the funny thing is, if we take the view that everything is an opportunity for expansion, everything is an opportunity to know God more intimately, everything is an opportunity to know love more wholly, everything is an opportunity to know what I am more fully. If we take that lens, we experience it to be true. If we give the universe the chance to behave as if it were a school of expansion, a playground for consciousness to experience itself, if we give it that opportunity, if we give it that invitation, it might just show up as that. It's where it gets interesting. Our view, our story is not just story. I mean, it is just story, right? But it's also the lens through which we live and experience and thus create reality. So these cultural narratives we tell, the narrative of self, the narrative of who I am, and the narratives of what the world is, these are formative parts of the world that we're living in and the world that we're suffering from, the world that many people are suffering from. So this is no small endeavor. We are the universe expanding. What story are we going to tell of self? What story are we going to tell of this world? I've noticed something interesting in my experience. When I tell the story of me being a stupid fucking idiot, I tend to behave more like a stupid fucking idiot than when I don't tell that story. It could just have been a coincidence, but I think not. So this falling in love with our own being, this falling in love with ourself, is such a powerful fundamental story, such a powerful shaper of our experience of reality. If I see myself in interaction with a police officer who's hitting me at an Occupy spirituality gathering, perhaps, if I see myself as a stupid idiot, I'm probably not going to be best placed to respond to that from, but if I see myself as infinite and eternal, being connected with all things at all times, love itself, that might be a more helpful idea of who I am to communicate with the police officer from. It seems to me it might not be a coincidence that we're poisoning ourselves, we're poisoning the water and the air that we rely upon. It might not be a coincidence that this is happening whilst there is an epidemic of self-loathing, suicide, despair. This inner and outer can be seen as the same process. When I love myself, I don't abuse myself. When I love myself, I don't abuse myself. So this work, or this play, it's getting a bit serious there, wasn't it? I prefer play. This play of getting to know ourselves, of realizing what we are, is no small endeavor, it's no small thing. And no big deal either, of course. So we can find the opportunity and the gift in circumstance, we can find the opportunity and the gift in difficulties. And with the practice of this, with the seeing that this is true, that all circumstances, all events have many facets. And that if we look for gift and opportunity in events, we're quicker to find them. And not just in events, but in our own suffering. Has anyone here ever resisted suffering before? I think I have a couple of times. So there's something exquisite to be found in suffering. Something exquisite to be found in suffering. Not to celebrate suffering, but to honor its validity, its place, its wisdom, its love. I was asked earlier on today about the more painful times that I've faced, the more challenging times, the second dark night of the soul experience where there was this total meaningless emptiness, but not the beautiful liberating meaningless emptiness of things, but a crushing meaningless and emptiness of things. And there was a despondency and a hopelessness and so on. And my friend Grace asked me, what did you get from that? And what I got from it was the discovery that the core of my darkness, in the heart of the demons of my mind, is love itself. That on the other side of the most intense suffering, there is love itself. That in that which I had resisted the most and made most wrong, there was love itself at its core, all along. So this is why I like the idea of a religion that would simply say all is well. Like really, really, really well. You're okay, I'm okay, we're all okay. And we're completely messed up and screwed up and and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. There's something so beautiful in this divine drama. Birth and death. Universe is born and dying. Children coming into the world and children leaving the world. This whole experience. What a wild ride, what a wild trip. And there's a capacity in each of us to be peace, period. To be peace in the face of whatever is being faced. There is a strength at the core of our being that is at peace, that is peace, entirely regardless of anything that's being felt in the emotional body, anything that's being thought in the mental body, any imagined future, any past we might be suffering from. And so this radical gratitude is to open and open and open and open again and again and again and again to life, however it's teaching us right now. To let our hearts be broken open again and again and again and again. To lean in to life's fury and madness and pain and disconnection and all that good stuff, and say yes to it, or even thank you. This was the way that radical gratitude actually came into my experience. There was a pushing away of what would be called depression. There was a pushing away of this despair and this emptiness, and after a while I worked out that pushing it away wasn't working, that in fact the pushing it away, the resistance, was actually half of the problem that I was experiencing. There was this thing called depression, this sort of heavy energetic state, but what was more problematic was me pushing it away and saying no, or saying I should not be feeling this, I am wrong to be feeling this. And so having tried many ways of escaping this pain and pushing this pain away, and finally giving up because it wasn't working, I knelt. I think I'd been brought to my hands and knees by life and the way that it can sometimes do that. And I looked at this pain, I looked at this depression, I looked at this that I do not want to experience, and I said, thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. And in that moment was the beginning of the end of suffering. That's not to say I don't suffer. I'm still enjoying the human experience in its fullness. But it is to say that the needless suffering, the unavoidable suffering, was dissolved or undone in that moment, and then an ongoing exploring of this, to say thank you again and again and again and again, to show up to this moment in fullest reverence, maybe even with a hint of awe, maybe a little sprinkle of wonder, to really show up to this moment recognizing how utterly precious this moment is. And why is this moment precious? Well, there's an obvious answer, isn't there? Why is this moment precious? Because it's the only one that we have. This moment. This is it. This is your life. This moment right now is what your entire life has been leading up to. And of course, this is as true of any moment as any other. You know, we have this expression that your entire life up until now has led to this moment. We say it at times of significance in the narrative. And yet this is true always. This is true now. This is true now. This is true now. There's this astonishing culmination of events that brings us to this awareness, brings us to this moment. So this gratitude that might start with chocolate torts and things that we find it easy to be grateful for, to be thankful for. The invitation is to expand that appreciation, expand this gratitude such that it includes all things, such that it includes all phenomena, such that we be at peace with life in its entirety. Such that we recognize the perfection of this moment, the perfection of this being, again and again and again and again. We would cease to deny any longer the perfection of this moment, the absolute stunning, pristine perfection of this moment, including all that it does. Including all that it does, the memory of a loved one that we have lost, the fear of a future that may come, the pain over our heart, the thought of that child we saw suffering on that show earlier, whatever it might be, all this can be held, can be loved, can be embraced, can be utilized as opportunity for awakening, for healing, for transformation. All this play all this pain, pain is wonderful, isn't it? Isn't it such a great invention, pain? Like if I stab my hand with a fork, I might carry on stabbing my hand with a fork until I have no hand left to use, but pain tells me, nah, stop that. Don't do that. If I see myself as being unworthy, I get depressed. If I see myself as something other than beautiful and whole and complete, I get depressed. The pain tells me something needs to change. I've discovered also if I don't do what I'm here to do, I get depressed. I thought it might be a good idea to make money recently, so I went back to my old company. I went to Australia to do it. And on the first day of going back into this old lifetime stuff, I moved on from it. There was this almighty depression that set in. So I know when something of that nature happens, there's a gift there. So what's the communication? What's this telling me? Well, it's telling you that what you just did today was depressing. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And life in its sweet generosity helps us out as well. I had a dragonfly land on me in the car a few days later. And then a few hours after that, another dragonfly landed on me. And I've never had a dragonfly land on me once. So when it happened twice in a couple of hours, I'm like, okay, what's the symbol? What does shamanism have to say about the dragonfly? The dragonfly is about needing to make a significant change in life. So I knew I had to quit the business already. I knew I had to do so, but the dragonfly just helped me out. And remarkably, within hours of making this decision that had seemingly been impossible, everything just fell, all the obstructions fell out of the way. Now, I could have gone with that depression to a doctor, and we would be complicit in agreeing that depression was wrong, that you shouldn't feel depressed, shouldn't feel sad. We have all these ideas about what we should be feeling. And you shouldn't still feel grief after 3 months or 6 months or 12 months or 10 years. Coming back to this ignorance, we have no idea. We have absolutely no idea what we should be feeling or how long we should be feeling it for. If we're feeling it, we should be feeling it. If it's happening, it should be happening. If it's happening, it should be happening. If it's being felt, it should be being felt. So this saying yes to life as it is again and again. keeping in mind the possibility, even if it is just a possibility, that we really don't know what's going on. That our storying, our languaging of what's happening might actually have nothing to do with what's happening whatsoever. We give rather more responsibility to the mind, to thinking, than it has earned, or than it has the capacity for. And something quite magical can happen the more we lean into life, the more we trust life, the more we trust the intelligence of life, the more we open up to life and say yes, the more we treat life as an infinite intelligence that has our expansion and our well-being as its priority, the more we experience life as this, the more we experience life as this. There's a favorite question that Albert Einstein said was the most important question we can ask, which is the universe friendly? Is the universe friendly? Is the universe friendly? And like anything, we have to discover for ourselves. Why is it such an important question? Is the universe friendly? In my experience, if I believe that it is, it is. And if I believe that it's not, it's not. Which is interesting. If I believe I'm living in some sort of magical wonderland of extraordinary synchronicities and connections and abundance and ease and delight and wonder and awe, then I experience reality as that. If I believe that I'm here to reach some elevated state of consciousness and that I must meditate at least 15,000 hours before I get there, then I'll likely experience that to be true. At least the doing the meditation part. I may or may not be disappointed after 15,000 hours and when I discover that Zazen wasn't really the practice for me. So these stories we tell are primary to our experience of reality. A brain tumor diagnosis was something that happened to me a few years ago, and it was one of the best things that's ever happened to me, one of the most beautiful events I've experienced, full of joy and awakening and opportunity, and no more stress or suffering than day-to-day life. And part of that came from simply a recognition that if the stub toe could deliver spiritual growth and insight into the nature of mind, then a brain tumor diagnosis might deliver something even more than that. This is what I was speaking of with the proportionality. The bigger the drama, the bigger the collapse, the bigger the breakthrough. It's when we have our darkest times, the nervous breakdown, where everything's falling apart. They're the times of real growth. They're the times where we emerge on the other side with wings. We emerge on the other side as something more than we were when we went into that fire. When we stewed in our own acidic juices, as the butterfly does. I'm sure there are more efficient and easy ways of evolving spiritually than the ones that than the paths of suffering and challenge and so on. And certainly we do a lot of looking to find easy routes, ways of circumventing suffering, ways of escaping ourselves. But it does seem to be a key ingredient of expansion and awakening for a lot of people. So if we're experiencing intense suffering, we might be really, really grateful. We might consider how wonderful it is that we have been graced with some suffering. How different might life be to embrace our suffering when it arises? How different to say, when my pain is felt in the heart, to say, hey sweetie, how you doing? Welcome. Ooh, how wonderful. Some despair. Haven't tasted that for a while. Anxiety. Oh, how interesting. To welcome all as it presents. To be grateful for this experience of being, to be grateful for the sheer fact of our being here now. And to enjoy it. And to go easy on ourselves when we are not enjoying it. We have so many sophisticated ways that we beat ourselves up. We might beat ourselves up for beating ourselves up. Has anyone ever done that? Oh, I'm supposed to be loving myself and I'm beating myself up. What an idiot I am. I read a quote the other day that to remember in our communications with others that everyone is fighting major battles. Everyone is fighting major battles. Everyone. This was Plato, apparently. I think I've misquoted him. It doesn't sound that good the way that I say it, but the way that I read it sounded great. So this is to expand this gratitude to all of us, all of our own being, all of our shadow, all of our demons and idiosyncrasies and foibles, and to extend the same courtesy to others also. To be grateful for everyone being exactly as they are. And if they do us the great spiritual service of triggering us, if we experience irritation, if they are so effulgent in their generosity as to irritate us, it seems they are irritating me. We say, they made me angry. No, they didn't. How could anyone make you angry? How could anyone make you sad? You're infinite and eternal being. You get to create this stuff yourself. With the story you tell about what's happening, generating the feelings that we experience. So this, can anyone think of someone in their life who challenges them somewhat in the way that they communicate with you? Maybe just a little bit. So take a moment to feel gratitude for this infinite and eternal being taking on the role of whatever they are for you to show you where there is an obstruction to love's presence in your field, in your being. They're showing us where we would step out of peace, where we would walk into war and turmoil. All our enemies are our Bodhisattvas. We think the Bodhisattva is going to show up maybe at the front of a room of a gathering like this and bestow blessings, or probably be wearing a nice white robe, maybe a golden crown or something like this. But the Bodhisattvas show up as the most irritating people, the most unlikable characters that just go around triggering everyone and giving us opportunities to love, giving us opportunities to love more fully. So this can be a helpful perspective if we next see someone and tell a story in our mind of them being a shit or whatever it might be, to consider that this is actually God itself, that this is actually infinite intelligence itself manifesting in just the perfect way to cause you to be irritated in just the same way that you were with Daddy all those years ago. How exquisite. The whole thing a setup, the whole thing a conspiracy of awakening, a conspiracy of healing, a conspiracy of transformation. It's a nice story, I think. It's a story that feels better to tell than some. Have you noticed that everything's okay? Have you noticed that everything's okay? Have you noticed that it's okay that there might be part of us that hasn't noticed, or perhaps part of us that would insist that no, that's not true, everything is not okay? Can we identify with that or relate to that, find that part of ourselves? The part of ourselves that would deny the perfect peace of this moment. The part of ourselves that would step up to infinite love and say, I'm not sure if I'm ready. Maybe later. This mind that we give so much value to certainly does not want to discover peace and infinite love. Because in the discovery of this peace and this infinite love, me kind of has to die. The me that wants the drama, the me that's rather comfortable with my suffering, that's rather in the habit of being will, doesn't actually want peace. We say we want the truth. The mind says, I want the truth. Yeah, I want the truth. Give me the truth. What's really happening here? And this always brings to mind, in my book I have various quotes of the usual characters, Buddha and Jesus and so on, but also sort of Bill Hicks and John Lennon and in this case, Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise, because they were in this movie called A Few Good Men. And in the courtroom scene, there's this wonderful courtroom scene where Tom Cruise is demanding the truth from Jack Nicholson, the senior sergeant or whatever he is. And Jack Nicholson says, you want the truth? And Tom Cruise sort of thumps the court and says, yeah, I want the truth. He said, you can't handle the truth. I often think of this as sort of emblematic of the spiritual journey, the spiritual path. Yeah, I want the truth. Oh, do you? Of course, the me that wants the truth, the character that thinks it's on a journey of discovery and enlightenment, really doesn't want the truth. You don't exist. Oh, not that truth. You don't know anything. You're profoundly ignorant. Oh, no, not that truth. You're projecting your fears and insecurities on the world 99% of the time. Oh, no. I'm not looking for that one. I'll take the infinite and eternal being true. Yeah, I can handle that. Yeah, I can. I'm infinite, I'm eternal, sure. Perfect, whole and complete as I am. Yeah, I'm down with that. So this dying, I as well as loving pain, not in some weird S&M way, though there's nothing wrong with that if BDSM is your thing. As well as loving pain, I love death. Steve Jobs said it was the world's best invention, or life's best invention, and I agree with him. Life's best invention. Because there's something in the reality of death that brings a quality to life that is simply absent without this idea of death. And when we really become intimate with the truth that we could fall down any moment, when we become intimate with this truth, the quality of this moment, the quality of this moment, the value of this moment suddenly skyrockets. Consider that this moment is your last. Play with that for a moment. What would it be if in the next moment, gone, nothing, this, all over? There's something quite liberating in this. And to bring gratitude to something that we would not be grateful for is a death of sorts. It's an ego suicide. The me that would make things wrong, the me that would suffer, the me that would be victim, the me that would set itself apart from life. When it says thank you for the most unbearable things, it's gone. It's like ego mind can't really stay around too much in gratitude. Like ego mind will be grateful because it's been told to be grateful, right? Or because it thinks there's a cookie at the end, I might manifest a bigger car. So ego mind will be grateful to be a good boy or to get something. But in the actual state or resonance of gratitude, in the actual total receptivity and openness and appreciation and unity, there's no space for separation. There's no room for me. There's this wonderful quote. I'm a bit of a quote geek. This one is St. John of the Cross. He said to ask God, "What is grace?" And God replied, "Everything that happens. Everything that happens. Everything that happens." So this is the invitation, this is the possibility that exists for us as awakening beings on planet Earth in 2015 to experience life as perfection unfolding. To suffer when we suffer, to experience pain when we experience pain, to experience loss when we experience loss, but to do so within the narrative of play, within the narrative of God playing with itself. Consciousness knowing itself as itself, playing hide and seek with itself, the universe expanding. So many of our cultural narratives, our stories, are just really, really shit stories. Growing up on planet Earth, we have a lot of shit stories to choose from. So one story says that you were born sinful, and shame and guilt is your birthright. And if you behave yourself, then maybe you'll get to this place called heaven when you die. But be very careful, because if you get the words wrong, you're off to hell. Or if you're born homosexual, then you're off to hell. What sort of perverse God would make someone homosexual and then punish them for it? So we have these crap stories. And at their core, so often, are the very same stories, the underpinning fundamental narratives. And it can be helpful to expose these stories, these myths that we've outlived, but still linger in our consciousness, still linger in our systems, still linger in our DNA. One of those stories would be the story of, or the myth of materialism. Ontological materialism and ethical materialism. So ethical materialism, we know that buying lots of things isn't going to make us happy. We've probably tried it and found out it didn't work, or we've seen in Berkeley, we've probably seen the studies down at the Greater Health and Happiness Center. You have a happiness center in Berkeley, right?
The Greater Good.
Yeah, the Greater Good, that's right. So that we can just pop down the road and get the scientific research that demonstrates this. That spending money on someone else actually brings greater happiness than spending money on ourselves. That it is in giving that we receive. And the story of ontological materialism, the story that this physical world we perceive and feel and interact with, this physicality, this matter, that this is primarily real. Just a belief, just a story, no scientific data for it whatsoever. In fact, plenty to contradict, to suggest that consciousness is primary, and yet, because most scientists have the belief that matter is primary, it's considered to be somewhat scientific. So we have a lot of crazy characters walking around the planet thinking that they're a body, thinking this is who they are. And we have the myth of separation, where the crazy character has an idea in their mind of who they are. We actually believe that we are separate from life, that there's a me here that's English and other me's over here who are American. But that's okay, we're on the same side. We have a special relationship, apparently. So this story of separation, this story of me, is what allows Tony Blair to hear a voice in his head saying to go to war, despite his senior legal advice pointing out that it's an illegal war, and despite hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets of the UK, which is allegedly a democracy, and saying, no, don't go and do that same thing that we've seen you do again and again, where you go off and bomb and murder hundreds of thousands of people. But he has a voice in his head that says to go to war, and he believed that voice was God. Do you see the problem we're in? When our prime ministers are hearing voices in their head to go off to war.
You hear what George Bush's voice was saying in his head?
Don't stuff up, don't stuff up, don't stuff up. Yeah. Time for a crusade. So this work that we do, this personal awakening, this navel-gazing, narcissistic work that we do of awakening and self-inquiry and so on, it can seem that way, right? It is the work of life expanding. It is the undoing of these old stories, these old patterns. And it is revolutionary to live from the new story. To live from a story not of materialism, not of separation, nor of insufficiency. Myth number 3 would be insufficiency. The idea that there is not enough, or that I am not enough, that I am insufficient. Or the idea that there is not enough in this world. So we take these myths of materialism, insufficiency, and separation. Stories we can all identify, stories we've all lived, stories we all have still, however awake we are in our system, in our consciousness, in our cells, in our DNA. And we can choose to live a new story. We can choose to live from a place of unity. We can choose to live as unity. We can choose to live as immaterial being, to tell a story of immaterial being. Because that's what the data, both subjective and scientific research, points to, is our immaterial being, not material, not matter, not physical beings, not animals, not some biological mechanism. That's an experience that the immaterial being that I am is having, or a device or a tool that the immaterial being that we are utilizes to engage reality, to play the game of being human, to play the game of birth and death, to play the game of pain and pleasure. And we can tell the story of plenty. We can live the story of plenty. We can commit to knowing ourselves as enough. We can commit to knowing ourselves as enough. To loving ourselves. To loving ourselves just as we would love an infant or a puppy that's crapping on the floor, but we know that's just what puppies and babies do. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. We apply this so easily to children, to animals, and yet so sparingly to ourselves. So there's an invitation to get serious about loving yourself. To fall in love with yourself again, and again, and again. To see yourself as immaterial being, to see yourself as pure awareness, to see yourself as infinite and eternal being, to see yourself as Buddha nature, to see yourself as Christ consciousness, to see yourself as inherently valuable. And to be committed to this love relationship. I like your pink scarf. Life is just so full of delights and pink scarves. Vegan restaurants. Has anyone here been to Millennium? Beautiful little spot. Breathing. Falling in love. Falling out of love. The joy of connection, the grief of disconnection. This whole drama. This whole drama. The suffering of the world. The suffering of the world. I'm grateful for this because this gives us in 2015 so much opportunity to serve, so much opportunity to be useful, so much opportunity to help people. And in my experience, that's the greatest high that is available to the human, is to be useful, to really be useful to others, and especially to do so as an authentic expression of the individual, of the unique individual being that we are. So not to be caught in the martyrdom, not to be in the being nice for the sake of being nice, or to be serving from a place of inadequacy, but rather to be serving as an expression of our truth, who we are. serving from a place of wholeness, serving from a place of self-love. I had the great joy and pleasure of teaching in a prison the other day, up in Portland. And beforehand I assumed it was going to be a medium security prison. That was just an assumption that I made. And on the way in I discovered that it was a maximum security, and that amongst our yoga class that my friend was teaching, there was Oregon's first school shooter. It's so sad that we have this phrase, a school shooter, for this particular kind of insanity. There were other individuals in there who had murdered people, who had been convicted of murder. And I was going in to speak about radical gratitude. Some of these gentlemen would be dying in prison. I have no idea what it is like to live in a maximum security prison, but I imagine it's extremely intense and extremely challenging. That we do this to people who clearly need more love, not less, is idiotic and big business, the business of incarceration. What I was struck by in this gathering with these people was a couple of things. One was that there were no murderers present. There were no rapists present. There were just people trying to get their yoga right. And what was also beautiful to notice was that this radical gratitude that I was doubtful, fearful would be relevant for these individuals. I kind of expect them to say, who is this idiot Englishman coming in here telling us about radical gratitude? Try being grateful with 110 years of sentence ahead of you. Try being grateful when you're seen as a kiddie fiddler and all the other inmates take turns to beat the shit out of you. But what I found was that amongst these individuals, there was actually a deep recognition of the truth of this way of being, choosing to surrender again and again, to find the good, to be grateful again and again. Not only the validity of this was discovered and spoken of and shared, but the necessity of this. The necessity of this in such an environment as a maximum security prison. And this is a powerful symbol, of course, this prison, because we're all in prisons of our own creation. Anytime we're not in peace and joy, we've stepped back into our cell. Anytime we're not in celebration, anytime we're not feeling connected, we've stepped back into our cell of thoughts, of beliefs, of self-images, of conditioned thinking, of conditioned mind. And the good news is that again and 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 again, we're given the opportunity to escape, to be reborn, to die and be reborn, and to say yes to everything just as it is, and even better to say yes, thank you to everything just as it is a way back into the celebration, back into the connection. And start with the chocolate brownie. Start with the sunset. Start with the fact that we're living in Berkeley or in California or we are amongst the luckiest people upon this planet right now. We're astoundingly well blessed to be able to do this on a Sunday evening rather than fight for our rights or scramble for food. And then casting all that aside, there is the simple truth of our being, the simple truth of being to be grateful for, the simple fact that we are. And it's just a ride. That's the Bill Hicks quote in my book. It's just a ride. Has anyone else studied the philosopher sage Bill Hicks? He's a comedian as well, so this is a great way of learning. There's a tendency to take this whole life thing rather seriously and to take ourselves rather seriously. Which is fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But it might not be the most authentic way of being or the most fun way of being. I'd also suggest that laughing at oneself is spiritual practice par excellence. To laugh at oneself is enlightenment. To laugh at oneself, to see the movements of mind, to see me doing what me does, inventing itself, asserting itself, judging, attacking, being fearful, just doing what me does, and just to laugh at it, just to enjoy the entertainment. To see our neuroses and to laugh at our neuroses, to see our patterns that are still the same, really, even though we've been working on them for 30 years. A little softer, maybe, a little less something somewhere along the lines, but really still the same. It reminds me, Ram Dass, I think it was asked, after all these years, 50 years of psychotherapy, psychedelics, spiritual practice, working with your gurus, have you changed? He said, no. Really just as I was, but I have become a connoisseur of my neuroses. And we're all in this together, right? This is the same for all of us. This is the best hope that we've got, that we might gain some familiarity of how insane we are, or how the insanity of the human mind, the human condition, expresses specifically through us. What's the particular conflagration of patternings and tendencies that shows up in us? What a wonderfully unique idiot I am. I'm ignorant in an entirely unique way. No one has ever been ignorant in the way that I have been ignorant upon this planet. How cool is that? It's a delightful aspect of the process or the journey, the journeyless journey of realizing we are impersonal presence, is recognizing how that realizing of impersonal presence is a unique and personal experience for every speck of impersonal presence that it occurs through. Everyone's enlightenment is their own. Everyone's awakening is their own. Yeah, there's certain patterns and so on, and if you're If you've got a lot of spare time, you can create systems of consciousness and types of awakening, and people like me will read them. And of course, those maps are just maps, and no one has ever spoken about anyone's awakening other than their own. We share in the hope that it's helpful, but really it's only helpful to me. This is my study. This is the best way I've found of continuing to expand and evolve as a student of life, is to sit in front of a room and see what's said. And sometimes really wise stuff comes out. It's like, wow, where did that come from? There's an intelligence in the ignorance, or there's an intelligence in the surrendering of the knowing. So in the not knowing, or in the silence, there's an intelligence. There's a movement in the stillness, something emergent. It's one of the... I love doing these gatherings because I don't know what's going to be said. So it's rather like, for you, I hope, somewhat entertaining. Ooh. And I can disagree with myself as well, you know. I could have just the same experience of attending or listening. To listen and question and, oh no, you got it wrong there. No, that's not what Krishnamurti said. Krishnamurti is perhaps my least favorite teacher, and the other day someone attended a gathering and said, "You remind me of Krishnamurti." I wasn't sure whether to be offended or complimented. And we share the same birthday, so maybe that's... So we can celebrate our ignorance, we can celebrate the vastness, the astonishing vastness of our ignorance. And the extraordinary way in which we pretend otherwise. Everyone's walking around as if they know what's going on. We scurry from place to place, believing that we're making choices. It's such a wonderful, 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 wonderful setup. So exquisite, such an exquisite illusion. So real. So real. Like, it really seems like it's real, doesn't it? It does for me, anyway. It still seems so real that I walk through doors. I'm sure I can walk through walls, but they just seem so real. I believe in them. This all seems so real. It's so convincing. This astonishing virtual reality that our brains create, fabricate for us every single moment, including this character, me. This experience of individuation. I think I am going to start a religion and call it All Is Well, or You're Perfect As You Are. There are no commandments, just some invitations that you're free to decline. You can smile if you want, but you don't have to. You can create something, if you like, a piece of art, political party, a character, an avatar, or not. Do whatever you want. It's all good. I watched a documentary about Scientology the other day, and called Going Clear. I really recommend it because it's interesting. If you want to discover how to create a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, I would go no further than Scientology and the Catholic Church. I think the two together have got it down. And the triggering of guilt and shame, and then working with people from that place. Very, very powerful. Just as Hitler triggered the fear and worked from that. This is the way that anyone seeking to dominate others has dominated others, is to understand the human mind. And so when we free ourselves from this shame, when we free ourselves from guilt, it's not to say that the thought that I am something other than whole and complete will never arise again, but when we reside as wholeness, when we know ourselves as inherently worthy, as inherently valuable, when we start to really get how stunningly beautiful we are, we actually start to open up to see just how gloriously beautiful we are. When we start to live this new story, when we start to live free from fear, or free from fear's influence, we no longer can be herded. We no longer can be manipulated. So to be free as an individual, to break free as an individual, is the universe expanding and is the social justice movement as well. We're in a bit of a hub of social justice here, is my understanding, in Berkeley. Is that correct? Like the Occupy spirituality movement and so on were pretty big here, and there's a lot of permaculture and these sorts of things, is my understanding. So for me, I'm not interested in transcendence for the sake of transcendence, so I can just be transcendent of everything. Or realizing my true nature so I can just be happy for the rest of my life, because it's nice for me. Though that's great, right? I'm not knocking it. But I'm interested in what truth, what enlightenment, what awakening does for the world, what it does for society. And so if my awakening is not finding some expression in loving service, then it never happened. If I claim to know that I realize that I am all things, if I'm not serving all things, I haven't allowed that realization to come to its natural conclusion. And this service can be invited as play. Not service that should be done because we need to get into heaven, or because we need to please mummy or daddy, or we need to convince ourselves that we're a good person, but simply an expression of the unity of what we are, simply an expression of the oneness that we are. When I realize I am you, I can't harm you. When I realize I am you, I can only love you. It's kind of how it is. There's something in the creativity that is divine, that is so deeply authentic. To create, to bring things into form. We're creation machines, we're creating. And we've done so mostly unconsciously, unaware of the cultural narratives and the fundamental stories through which we've been living. And the great joy of this time is that we can have a look at our stories, our cultural narratives, and we can choose whether we're going to carry on using them or not. We can choose better stories, we can live better stories. And of course it starts with us. It starts with you and me. I'm not sure how successful I've been today at stopping things from getting serious. These are supposed to be meetings in love, truth, and laughter. And I'm doubting if I've fully delivered on the laughter. You can take your money out as you leave if you feel that you haven't got what you invested in. So I'd like to invite comments or questions or insights that have arisen. Or hey.
I spent 7 years taking care of my parents with Alzheimer's disease. So both of them. So I watched them slowly die. At the same time, I had this bicycle accident. I broke my arm in 27 places, and then I had the nerve crush in my arm. So I had this, while I was going through this, take care of my parents, I also went through this 2-year journey of incredible physical pain. And you're the first actual sort of quasi-spiritual teacher to really kind of have a very similar kind of experience to myself, in the sense of almost physical death, or going close to death, or going this incredible physical pain, and observing the diminishing of the body and the incredible physical pain, at the same time a simultaneous expansion, opening up, and love energy coming from almost like the feeling of death. That as you were speaking, it was like nectar, because I was feeling like you're a brother almost, like I was feeling the same kind of expansion. So beautiful, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
But you can't really explain it to anyone. I know you do it beautifully. I don't know if I could do it.
I don't think I can. I think it is true that no one can, and that's one of the funnier things about these gatherings.
Yeah, and it's like what you were saying about not knowing. That's exactly right. It's like there's no. I had no interest in spirituality. I'm not sure I do still, actually, in the sense of all the concepts and ideas and whatever psychological analysis that goes into it actually bores me. I don't really find it interesting. But I like your discussion because it seems more pragmatic, maybe. I don't know if that's the word. It's like, it's just...
A spirituality that is useful and relevant to life itself might be a good idea. And useful to life itself in 2015. Maybe would be useful.
It's like being like a child again, isn't it? I mean, I feel like I'm a child in some ways. Like, sometimes people ask me how old I am, and I say I'm 8. And actually, I'm not really kidding. Because, I mean, I am kidding, obviously, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But in terms of like where I really discovered who I was, I was 8, I'm 8.
And this childishness or the childlikeness, of course, Zen Buddhism speaks of the beginner's mind. In Christianity, we speak of going to become like a child to enter heaven. This childish appreciation, and we're lucky to have this steady supply of children running around the place to remind us of how simple life can be and how enjoyable life can be. Like, you know, when the kids are just like, everything's amazing. It's like, oh my, why is that way? Why is that way? Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
We believe what? I see this with my friends as they start to, the kids are saying, why do we do things this way? It doesn't take long for a child to work out that we've made a few errors as human beings. Like, why do we do that? Why do we do that? So there's this curiosity, this childish curiosity.
The strange thing is the adults are redirecting the curiosity away from curiosity all the time. I mean, when you see like little kids walking around where I live at the lake, and kids are looking at the ducks and everything, and the parents will look at it for a couple seconds, but they're back on their phone or something. They're not going to really...
Well, they know it's just a lake, unless they've sat still and shut up for 10,000 hours, and in which case they might know that it's not just a lake. It's a funny old game, isn't it? It's a funny old unfolding. Would anyone else like to share something or comment or hi?
Hi. Yeah, I was watching, I think it was last night, a program about global warming, and it said, I think it said in a decade, all the turtles were going to be dead. And you think, geez, look at this reality. Do you have any suggestions?
To face the truth as it is and to feel the pain of it, to open your heart to it again and again, to be broken open by the utter despicable tragedy that is happening in our oceans, like the abuse of beauty, and to do something about it, to be something about it, whether that be giving money to that turtle protection charity, or if you've watched Cowspiracy, you might not want to give money to some of the larger environmental groups. Has anyone watched Cowspiracy? In a nutshell, the biggest cause of climate change is animal agriculture. That's the inconvenient truth within the inconvenient truth. And you would think that environmental organizations such as Greenpeace and Oceana and Amazon Alliance and so on would be focused on communicating to people the biggest cause of climate change. But they don't actually do that, because it's not good for business. It's not a good fundraiser. If you tell everyone to stop eating meat, they give you less money. So how wonderful that we live in such interesting times that we can do something. Not eat turtle meat.
Yeah.
It's not quick in it.
One other question. Let's read the book about Gary Snyder in India. And he mentioned in northern India there was only one temple dedicated to the geez, should there be yogis, should there be one temple dedicated
What's that other question?
Yeah, I think that was the question. The question is, should, in India, there's one temple in northern India dedicated to animals. Shouldn't there be more temples dedicated to animals?
Is it the turtles or the emptiness that's more important?
The what?
Is it the turtles or the... I can see there's a mission here for you somewhere.
Yeah, there is.
Either the turtles or the emptiness.
Yeah.
I mean, to my mind, there's just the perfect number of temples in the world right now.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know what the number is, but I'm pretty confident that it's the right number.
Still seems like there's not enough.
That's a valid experience. We might have time for another question or comment or insight.
I really appreciate sharing briefly about your dark periods and how you use that as a gateway into mean, just personally, it just feels right to share that that's a place I find a lot of my experiences is kind of a heavy, stuck state. And so the idea of like saying thank you to it, I think there's an openness to that. But there's also this place that's like bullshit, you know, like I know it's like wake up every day, every morning, feel, you know, like there's not really like a desire to do anything and so
yeah, I know that too.
and honestly, it doesn't feel like there's an intuition or some openness that there's like a breakthrough possible, but it also feels like
Wishful thinking.
it's real dark, like this place, it's real dark.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go, like it's just
So bringing a curiosity to that and yielding to the heart. For me, most of this is happening in the heart. The heaviness or the connection or the disconnection is happening in the heart. So to bring a yielding to what's being felt, a willingness to feel more and more and more, ceasing to insist upon some feelings not being permissible. So to even lean in a little to that. Ask, what's the gift here? What's the opportunity in this? Ask if this were to facilitate healing, transformation, or awakening in some way, what's that way? Ask and you shall receive, in your dreams. The book that finds its way to you, how this works. This is the beauty of oneness. And I know that voice that would say bullshit.
It's interesting because I felt quite a bit of grace experience over, but at this place it almost feels like a turnaround, like almost like this, or I've been fighting these myself somehow, to where like the idea of like the book coming or a dream being helpful, almost seems just like, what I'm hearing you say is that there's an openness or that a willingness to, that is a possibility, and looking for that there's the potential for it to actually be supported somehow.
Yeah, if we're looking for something, we might find it. Or if we're open to the possibility of something being found, it massively increases our chances of finding it.
It's interesting, this place almost feels like it wants to continue to not let go.
Yeah, there's a lot of self probably invested in this being a problem. I mean, the me that has told the story of being the victim of depression, for example, or the sufferer, or the one who hurts too much, he has to die in the discovery that this was merely God tickling me all the way along. And there's a discovery that the more we yield, the more we lean in, the more we discover our unbreakableness. And the more we can discover, like, it's possible to be depressed and to enjoy it.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I don't know if I'm completely ready to like just give all that up.
Yeah, great. That's beautiful, to be honest, right? It's like, I actually think, I was asked a while back by a Zen master called Doshin. I went into Dokusan and blah, blah, blah to him for a moment or two, and he said, Will, have you not suffered enough yet? He was sort of incredulous. He was like, what are you still doing with that? I was like, oh yeah.
How did you respond to that?
I think I responded with some sort of dharmically correct response, but what I really probably wanted to say was, oh, piss off. Which would be another way of saying, no, I haven't suffered enough yet. I want to suffer some more, goddammit. It's like there's that voice in us, there's that child in us that doesn't actually want peace, that doesn't actually want truth, doesn't actually want love. Because if it did, it would just notice that it's here. And that's great. That's beautiful to notice that resistance. To be honest with yourself as you are, that there's a part of you that does not want to let go of that yet. If you're really lucky, you'll get a diagnosis of a brain tumor or something like that that will sort of spur you along your way and provide a little bit of extra focus. But hopefully you're not as stubborn as me and you don't need quite such clunky tools of awakening. I'm wary of people needing to get to places and so on. So maybe one last comment or question. Or, hi.
Well, thank you for the talk tonight. It was I felt a very deep opening and an expansion. And I have some circumstances in my life that are very challenging that have sort of caused a little dark night of the soul recently. And something just opened. And I think the key was when you talked about the present moment and accepting that everything needs to be exactly as it is. And when you said that, I don't know, something I just dropped, like I was in an elevator and I just went, and I realized that in that moment I took it in so deeply that it had a ripple all the way back in time, and all my stories about how it hasn't been okay. My childhood wasn't okay, or my birth trauma wasn't okay, or my past lives that I've imagined are not okay. And it just went there too, and it's like it just disappeared, everything, for a moment. That was just in an astounding way, and I just want to thank you for that. It was just an incredible evening. Thank you so much.
My great pleasure, and of course it had nothing to do with me.
Well, you're the channel for it.
It's entirely a coincidence.
Yeah.
It was your own divine being, your own infinite and eternal being doing what it must. And I'm very happy to have been coinciding with that experience. Yeah, I'm immensely grateful to each one of you for bringing your precious consciousness, your divine being, your perfect presence to the experience this evening and creating this shared experience. And thank you again to Kent and Kelly and all the Open Circle guys for putting this on. Yeah, thank you.